We're filming today for the Hamilton College Jazz Archive, and it's my great pleasure to have one of my favorite saxophonists, Mr. Jerome Richardson. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much. Glad to be here.
You've made a living on both coasts a couple times. Is that right?
A couple times? I guess you'd call it that. When I first started, I was born and raised in Northern California. And I played in and around San Francisco, so forth. And finally joined Hamp's band and came back here and saw what New York was like and went back, and then came back here again. I said, it's time for me to come to New York. So it worked out, though it didn't work out too well in that my wife and I could not agree at that time. And so she didn't want to come to New York, and I said, well, bye.
You needed to be here.
Yeah.
The scene at that time, was this late 50s or?
Early 50s,
early
53.
50s. Yeah. A lot of recording going on.
Yeah, it was a lot of recording, and then there was a lot of music, and where I was, there was not much. I had done everything there was to do in San Francisco.
Yeah.
So I knew I had to get out of there.
Right.
And I wanted my wife to come. She wanted to stay with her family. I said, well, okay.
Is that, when you got here, you started doing some combo work and?
Well, I did some combo work earlier on. I played the Apollo Theater and Savoy and different places. You know, when you pick up a job here and there, so you do whatever you can.
Yeah.
And then I was doing, I was working at the Menton's Playhouse with Kenny Burrell. Sometimes I'd work there by myself, sometimes I'd work with Kenny, sometimes Kenny would work with me, and we shifted off. So about 2 weeks before Christmas, we got fired. I mean, they were closing the place or whatever. I said, uh-oh, and my wife, my second wife, was then pregnant with my daughter. And long about that time, she had the baby. I'm saying, now what am I gonna do? But somebody came by, called me and said they needed a rock and roll saxophone player and a rock and roll singer to sing some rock and roll blues at the Roxy Theater. I said, you got it.
I can do it.
So I went in there for 2 weeks and ended up staying there 2 years.
No kidding.
And then I made contact through there, and I started doing a lot of recording around town.
That's great. When they said rock and roll blues, what exactly did they mean?
Rock and roll. It was
heavy rhythm and blues?
No, it wasn't rhythm and blues.
No?
It was rock.
Yeah.
They had, they had the rock rhythm things under it. And so I sang whatever blues that they gave me. And it was good enough for them. They weren't that well versed in rock music anyway. So it was all right with me. At the time, I needed a job.
Needed a gig, yeah.
Yeah.
When did the quartet with, was it Oscar Pettiford, come about?
Oh, those days were also before the Roxy. When I came in town, I had met Oscar Pettiford, some years back in San Francisco. And I heard he was working at the Bohemia, so I went there, went by there. And we talked a while, and he said, you want a gig? I said, yeah, I said, I need a saxophone player. I said, you got one. So I started playing there with him. And I always have to tell this story because it is, I think it's a funny one, in that one time, finally, I was doing a little bit of recording around there. And this record tape was going to have me be late to the gig, to Oscar's gig, see? So I told Oscar, I said, Oscar, I'll be late, I won't be here but till the second set or something. I said, okay, it's okay. So I came back, did the date, came back, and here was this alto saxophone player playing his ass off. I said, oh shit, I just lost my job. You know, guess who it was? Cannonball Adderly, you know. And that's how we all connected up to do his first album and so forth, you know.
I think I'd read about that. And
Yeah.
They said that the saxophone player was late or something, and
Yeah.
Cannonball sat in.
Yeah.
Didn't that, what was the tune that they called the?
I don't know what
Not
name.
April in not April in Paris, something else. And he did it really up.
Yeah.
You know, see if he could handle it. I guess he handled it.
He did.
As a matter of
He
fact,
did.
I've got a picture of one of his greatest hit records, and you're on it playing tenor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in those days, I came there playing tenor.
Oh.
What had happened with me, when Charlie Parker showed up, I was in San Francisco, and I heard all that stuff that Charlie was playing, and he messed up my mind just like he messed up everybody's mind, and I was playing alto then. I said, I can't do this. I said, you know, as much as I love Charlie Parker, I just can't. Everything I played on the alto sounded like Charlie Parker to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, no, I'll play tenor. So that's how I started playing tenor.
Yeah. Because there was maybe a little more room for your own thing in there.
Well, not so much so. There was not much room for alto saxophone players in those days. Not even now, you know, as far as popular saxophone, they always want tenor.
Yeah.
And so I started playing tenor. And that's how I came here playing tenor. So everybody thought I was a tenor player, but I never was.
Uh-huh. So as you got into the New York scene, you started getting your name around, and you get more calls. And
Yeah. I got very busy.
Good.
I played flute and all the flutes and a little clarinet and all the saxophones. So, and it was easy to work with the guys. That's another one. If the kids were to listen to this, as far as I'm concerned, the idea is to get along with your fellow musicians. If you're hard-nosed and you're always at odds with someone, or even behind the booth, the people who are recording you and all that kind of business. The main thing is to get along with people, you know. You could make it a happy day. You could have a happy time doing it, and you just will enjoy it.
Yeah.
You know?
They can hire you for your attitude as well as your musicianship.
That's right.
Yeah.
If you have I've known a lot of musicians who had bad attitudes, great players, and nobody wanted them.
Yeah. So, a couple years after you got here, we did find your. There you go with the alto flute.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
Let me see what was on that. Midnight Oil.
Notes by Ira Gittler. You had a nice band on that with, was it Hank Jones and your friend
Yeah,
Kenny
yeah.
Burrell?
Jimmy Cleveland, Hank Jones, Kenny Burrell, Joe Benjamin, and Charlie Persip on drums.
What was it like in the studio for an album like this? Did they give you a day, a couple days, or?
In those days,
Hours?
it was done in one day.
Yeah.
You might get a double date out of it, you
Uh-huh.
know, but it was done
Yeah.
all day long.
Mm-hmm.
I should have said midnight oil. I should have said all night long. Well, there's another one I did call out all night long anyway. I should have tried to be different with this, with the music on that.
How so?
Well, it was a different approach. I was playing alto flute and some. Harmonically, it was a different approach. And it is what you might call esoteric. And it didn't catch on very well because it wasn't, they couldn't tell whether it was commercial or good jazz. You know, one of those things.
It was in the cracks, right?
Down the middle, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although Prestige wasn't doing anything about advertising and promoting no one's record at the time. I used to say they used to go up on the Empire State Building and throw all the records off, and the one that end up on the on its edge on the ground, that's the one they do something with. So you know they didn't do anything with anything, you know.
That's quite a marketing philosophy. Oh. Well, you know, you recorded one of the first flute solos, didn't you, with Lionel Hampton?
I think so. There is controversy about
Yeah.
that one. This was back in 1949. Quincy Jones wrote a piece called Kingfish. And that was an odd one, too, in that we were rehearsing that, and there was only, I think, about 8 or 10 pieces playing that particular piece. And my wife called. We were in, I think, Kansas City or somewhere. My wife called from Berkeley. And I told Bobby played, I said, Bobby, play my part. And I was playing alto in the band at the time. And so I talked to my wife, came back, and I picked up my flute and went over to the trumpets, and transposed and played the melody with the trumpets. And Quincy said, that's it, because it was a new sound. So that's how that sound got there. Plus, I played the flute solo, too. And so I heard much later that Herbie Mann was supposed to have done the first flute solo, or Frank West.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know when they came out with it or not.
Because the things always weren't released
At the
as
same
soon
time.
as, right.
Yeah.
So 49, that's pretty early for that. Yeah.
So I don't know. I do know they said that I heard that it became quite a popular piece after it was released, you know. So they said, you better get back to New York. Well, at that time I was still on the West Coast.
Tell me about this picture we were just looking at of your European excursion with Quincy.
Quincy Jones. That was a show called Free and Easy. I think it was in 1959, 60.
Yep.
And we went over there with this show, which failed in Paris, and that that picture. Well, that's not the way we were setting in the show, but that picture, the background, is what the show was built on. We only had two. I think it was only one scene set up. The show was 2 hours long, and it stayed that way. But we were grouped back and on the sides, on each side. Mm-hmm. And it was, I think, was one of the first times also that a jazz band was playing on the stage with the actors and dancers and so forth. And we were playing very soft and was like stereo.
Oh.
And so that, and also that was a great band too, beside the fact, after that failed, we barnstormed around Europe, and all in all, I guess we were together from beginning to end about 10 months, I think. And we were broke,
yeah,
but had a good time.
Might as well be in Europe and be broke and see something new, I guess.
Yeah.
It's not easy to keep a group like that together, I would guess.
Well, there were 19 people in that band, and 19 different kinds of people. Different thoughts, different feelings about everything. But when we got together, we were like brothers and sisters. But after that, everybody went, you know, find us.
Yeah. I guess I wouldn't want to be the road manager.
Well, no. The thing about it is we would come in on time, we would catch the bus and so forth and so on, and do everything we had to do on time. There's only one person you had to go and find, that was Bud Johnson.
Oh.
Bud, God rest his dead. He was such a beautiful man, a beautiful player, but he would drink a little bit. Mm-hmm. So he would get juiced and not show up or something, you know.
Yeah.
But I think he was the only one there that disturbed anybody.
Uh-huh. Well, Quincy must have been fond of your playing, because I have here one of his great records, and I have to say,
Matari or something?
this is Walking in Space.
Oh, yeah.
And I have to say that the soprano sax that you played on this one tune here, I Never Told You, is just gorgeous. You remember that recording?
No.
Well, it was great.
I remember. Yeah, I remember one time I did. Dizzy Gillespie's thing. Do 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 do.
Oh yeah, Manteca.
Manteca.
Yeah.
And I played soprano solo in the middle, and they were trying to decide how they would play it. And I told Quincy, I said, maybe why don't you do it in 6? So he did it in 6, and then put strings behind it. So it sounded good. Even I had to say so.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a beautiful record, and your soprano playing is gorgeous. Roland Kirk.
I never told you so. You know how it goes?
It features Toots Thielemann on the harmonica.
Yeah, but I wonder how. I can't remember how it went.
I can't really sing it. But there's a spot in the middle where you do a really lovely soprano sax. Trust me, you should listen to it.
Yeah, I've got a lot of LPs I've got to get rid of. Since I moved back here, I do move all my stuff from Los Angeles and I had a whole house full of stuff.
Well, you know,
I've got about 6 boxes.
the Hamilton College Jazz Archive would be glad to talk to you about taking your albums.
Really?
Yes. We can talk about that later if you want.
Well, what I was trying to do, what I was hoping to do was sell them to
Sure.
these people that take them, you know.
Well, we'll think about that too. We'll talk.
All right.
Okay, I want to ask you about one of my favorite subjects, which is how the Thad Jones Mel Lewis band got together.
Well, you know that already.
Yeah,
you just got finished talking
Who was that
to
guy
one of
here?
the basic members.
But again, you know, I think you've been part of some great records in jazz, and this being one of them.
I've been very lucky.
Yeah.
Very lucky. Played with some very fine bands. The Quincy Jones band was a great one. The Thad Jones band was another one. And the one I'm playing with now, whenever we do work, is also a fantastic one. In the meantime, in between there have been some very nice. I've been very lucky, very blessed.
Yeah. Well, I can testify to that because I had the pleasure of sitting 5 feet away from the saxophones in the Slide Hampton band, and that was an experience.
Yeah, that is quite an experience.
Man, that is some very adventuresome arrangements, and I was thinking to myself, well, what's the big band of the 90s sound like? And I think that's it, because your arrangements are just really exciting.
Well, yeah, it was certainly in certain areas, the Charlie Parker arrangements were certainly different. Had a different approach. Some had a Latin approach. And they were certainly 90s and further. There were very fine arrangements, especially by Mike Mossman. And, well, of course, Slide. But the way they played them, the way we played the music, the soloists who played in the most difficult parts of some of that music were fantastic soloists. You know, like David Sanchez, man. He's the young buck boy that's coming up. He's gonna fire up on everybody.
Yeah.
He's beautiful.
It's nice that he has at least that big band to play in too, because there's not all the opportunities, I guess, that there used to be as far as.
There are good things to say about big bands and good things to say about small groups. In a small group, you have a chance to play on every piece. In a big band, there's no way that everybody can play on a piece, so sometimes it's one guy, sometimes it's another, and this and that. There are times when you really don't get a chance to play what you feel in a big band, because it's not your time to play it. Somebody else is doing it, And in that you're better off in a way be playing with a small group where you can do all the things you wish to do without the great big sound of that big band sort of framing you like a picture, and at times, I think that was the trouble sometimes with the Duke Ellington band. Some of those guys who were in that band, who left the band, just about couldn't do anything and didn't do anything without that framework of Duke Ellington's, you know, around them. And they almost did, they didn't know what to do, or they didn't try to do anything. The only one I know of that really did something and has made his mark is Clark Terry.
Most of them came back to the band, didn't
Most of them came back to the band. Most of them, I hate to say it, but died with the band.
Yeah. Ellington had a way of making them sound the best that they could.
Well, he wrote for them.
For them.
And you can, well, Ellington's band is a unique band in that they did write for those guys. So consequently, anybody sitting in the band, you take 13 pieces or whatever, however many that band was, of different guys, play the same music, won't sound the same. Will not sound the same. Because they took Duke's music and bent it to their own feelings. They did it to their own feelings, and that's what Duke Ellington's music was.
Yeah.
Came out to be, you know.
Right.
So nobody could come behind that.
Yeah. It's interesting. What brought you back to the West Coast, and was it in the late 60s?
Well, in the 70s. I went back to the West Coast because there was nothing here. There were no theaters were closed. Recordings had gone to Muscle Shoals. It just about wasn't anything, and the only thing there was Thad Jones and Mel Lewis once a week.
Yeah.
And we weren't making that much at that, you know. So I said, well, and then Quincy had been trying to get me to come out when he went out, and that was about 2 years before. I said, no, I don't want that, man, I don't want to be out there. So finally, I said, well, I better go. And he was there. And I did okay for about 5 or so years. And then all the people that I knew were going off into other things. And so consequently, my job dwindled. And then I got a group. I was trying to work with a group around there and so forth and do things. And I found that Los Angeles wasn't very good for me. So I said, well, as soon as I can, I'll leave here. So someone called me to do Black and Blue. And I told them I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do a show. And they kept talking away. I said, well, will you help us find some people in Los Angeles? I said, okay. So I set up audition place and so forth. So the second day, here were the two people that owned the show, the Argentinians. And let's see, what was her, what did she do? She's one of the producers from New York. And she said, Jerome, would you play for us? I said, I don't want to do the show. I don't want to be bothered. Well, it sounds kind of trite, but I had my horns there. I was getting ready after this audition, to put them in the shop to be repaired. I said, well, okay, I'll play. So I played. And the two Argentinians said, yeah, that's it. I said, oh, shit. And then I said, well, okay. So, no, I still don't want to play. So the money went up and up and up. So here I am.
Now it started to get serious.
Yeah.
Was this going to be a road show? Or were they...
Not at that time, no.
Okay.
We played, I came and rehearsed and right here in New York. And I can't think of the name of the theater. It was But we played on Broadway for 2 years. Could have been on Broadway for 4. But somebody tried to mess with the money.
Oh, dear. But you did the show for
Yeah.
2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what brought you back here?
Yeah,
Is that right?
that's what brought me back.
And you've been here since?
Yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
very glad I'm
Yeah.
here.
Good. Tell me about this particular, you remember this particular recording? With Joe Williams?
Jerry told you all about
Yeah,
that.
but I want to hear how you weathered it.
We all weathered it about the same way.
Yeah. He said it was a very early.
Well, we just got finished working the Vanguard. Here we were at 2 o'clock in the morning. Everybody's drinking till 4 or something, you know, half drunk. And Joe is evil because the record date is going to be at 8 o'clock in the morning. And everybody's evil. Oh, we didn't want to be there at all. And especially him. And because of it, I think because of it, and we were tired and everything, because of it, that record came out fantastic. We played, and it was like we didn't care, you know, we just, and of course we cared, but we were tired, and sometimes things happen like that. When you're so tired, you just, you can't, you're not on edge, you're not worried about playing the wrong note, you're not, you know, you're just sitting there playing and maybe enjoying it even then, you know, and of course we generally enjoy our work anyway.
Right.
And so it turned out to be a fantastic record, and that's what happened.
Yeah. That's great. What's your day, your weekly activities like nowadays?
Well, it's sort of off and on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as you know, I just finished playing the Iridium with Slide. This next week, all of a sudden, I'll be busy doing all kinds of things. Doing a Lester Young Memorial, doing, you see, I don't know, I have to look in my book to see what I'm doing, but there's 3 or 4 things. It almost feels like the old days.
That's great.
But that's just 1 week.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and so I take it as it comes.
Mm-hmm. You have,
And right now I'm working on, getting ready to work on a record. I'm working on it now. We're going to hope to record in June. And I also have a manager and all that now. So I'm going in that direction.
Yeah.
And this is the first time I ever had a manager.
no kidding, yeah. Well, I hope it works out for you. Sometimes the business of music can, sometimes it's good to handle it by yourself, and then sometimes you put it in other people's.
I find that it's very hard to advertise yourself, to talk about yourself.
Yeah.
I never will forget one day, it was in Hollywood. I wanted to play in one of these new places. So I made an appointment with the owner of the place. And I walked in, and there was a lady. So she looked at me, and I looked at her. And we looked at each other for a minute. She said, well, tell me about yourself. I said, oh. You know, and I said, well, I have a bio here. She said, no. She really stuck me in the middle. And so I did what I could do, told her what I could tell her. And I said, and also whatever else I haven't told you is in the bio.
Mm-hmm.
as you know, I might know, I didn't get the job because I found out that for me, it was impossible to tell them how great I was like I'm talking about someone else, like Clark Terry. I can talk about how great Clark Terry is for years and years, you know, and how wonderful he is, what a great man he is, and all the trumpet and so forth and so on. I can't tell him about me like that. And
hard.
so you need someone else to go before you.
Yeah.
And I've never had that because I guess it was my own fault, probably. It was hard to trust someone to handle my business. And there was only one person that I knew that I wanted to do it, and he didn't want, I asked him, it was John Levy, and he has Joe Williams and Nancy Wilson, and he didn't want to do any more than that.
Yeah, he understands.
Some years back, I asked him, I said, Joe, you know, John, I said, I'd like you to. He said, no. He said, no more instrumentalists. After Cannonball, that was the end of it. And I said, well, okay.
He would have been a good one.
Yeah, because I've known him for a long time, for years back when he was playing bass with George Shearing and was managing George Shearing way back then. And so I knew him to be a straightforward person. And that's the kind of person I want to be with. Now this young lady, Susie Reynolds, is a young lady. She's a brilliant girl. And I think we're going to do some things together.
Good. Do you ever do any work in schools or universities? Or would you?
A little bit. I'm not very good at, shall I say, lecturing. I can go in and rehearse the band, talk about what we're doing there, and but to stand up and lecture and to teach, I don't know quite what direction to start in. You know, once I get started, probably, you know, I would be all right. But just make that initial move to clear the, you know, the way or something, you know, whatever it is. Yet still, if you were to talk to me and ask me about saxophone or flute or whatever I do, I'm glad to talk to you about it. And I can tell you lots of things about it. If you pick up your instrument, I can tell you, well, do this, don't do this, so forth. But I've tried, I don't know why. I remember years back, I used to try to teach privately. And I found out the mothers of these kids wanted them to suddenly be able to play How High the Moon in 2 lessons. And I finally told them, I said, hey, take your money, tell your mom you're wasting your time, wasting mine, goodbye.
Oh, that reminds me so much of Doc Cheatham told us the same story. A woman came, the kid had not played a note, and she brought a Dizzy Gillespie book with her.
Yeah.
She said, how long is it going to be before he can play this? And he said the same thing you just did.
Yeah.
Take your money.
Yeah.
See you later.
You're wasting your time, the kids' time, and everything else. He's, you know, and I wanted to teach in a manner that they learn the instrument, learn how to start playing a sound, you know, learn to be precise with your fingers and so forth.
Yeah.
No, they don't want to.
Yeah.
No. Well,
what's your? You have an instrument that you like to play the most these days, as far as
I
your
think it's alto
saxophone?
saxophone.
Yeah. You ever get your piccolo out anymore?
Oh yeah, I
recorded-
practice. I have to.
Yeah.
I have to practice. Last night I took out my flute. Day before I was playing a little piccolo, just to keep chopping okay.
Yeah.
But I want to. I've been practicing a lot of saxophone because haven't been asked to play flute too much lately. But I also know that I've got to get my flute back together again, like I should.
Yeah.
And because on this record I might play some flute, or I'm looking to do some flute playing. I got some original pieces.
Yeah.
And I want to do a thing with Villalobos of the Bachianas #5,
Uh-huh.
and a couple things. So I really got to get my chops together.
Who do you hope to use on this upcoming record?
Louis Nash. Let's see. Russell. What's his name? Monroe plays guitar. And who else? Bass player. I don't know. We haven't decided on the bass player yet because it was George Mraz. I heard George Mraz had some difficulty about the date.
Okay.
It might be Peter Washington, who's very fine. And we haven't settled it yet.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to. Hope it goes well.
Yeah, hope so.
Is there any dates? You know, I don't know if the students have any idea what it might be like to get a call to do a session, whether it's a commercial session or something. And is that a pretty high pressure situation when you walk into a studio and they put the music in front of you and roll tape?
And you have to do it in 3 times.
Is that about the limit?
Well, generally, I used to think about it as rehearsing it, run over it, or play it 3 times. By the 3rd time, you're wasting a lot of people's time if you're not able to play it. But it is a pressure job. It is. Because one big thing about it being pressure is you're not playing before people, which is playing before people is much more relaxed thing than playing with a microphone sitting in your face.
Yeah.
You know, because you know then, even though you're recording while you're playing before people, the microphone itself just sitting there reminds you that this is going for posterity and you cannot make a mistake.
Yeah.
And that's pressure, you know, all the time.
Wow. Has your career allowed you to do any traveling? I know you've been to Europe with Quincy.
Oh yeah, I've traveled with various groups. I've gone to Sweden on my own and worked with groups over there. Finland, Spain, Portugal, France.
Do you find it fairly easy to fit in with European trios and so forth? Do they know the same repertory that?
Most of them know almost the same stuff. And if they don't, then you find something that they do know. There's a young man whose name I will not mention, who went over in France and cussed him out because they didn't know what he knew.
Oh.
So by the time we got to France, I think we came to France about a year later. And what was I doing? Oh, I was doing this show, Ain't Misbehaving. And I ran into some of the musicians that had worked with this person. He said they'll never work with him again. The whole union of French musicians just said, no more.
Well, it's going back to what we were talking about earlier with,
Sure.
with attitude.
Yeah.
Right.
You can, just because those people speak another language, that doesn't mean that they're dumb, ignorant people. They're human beings. And they know, even though they may not understand quite what you're saying, they know that you're not saying any nice things. And you're evil, and anytime in any language somebody is angry, you can always tell it,
Yeah.
whether you know what they're saying or not.
Right.
And but that's one thing that I like to do is learn something about their language. It's fun to me. I like to try to learn something, just maybe one line,
Right.
Just enough to make them smile,
Yeah. Well, this has been a fascinating hour.
Yeah, yes.
I'm so glad that not only that you could come, but that I got to hear you play with that
Well, I'm glad you.
marvelous group.
I'm glad you came to hear the band. And I'm really glad that you called me to do this. It's really a worthy cause, and I hope you got something out of it.
We certainly did. So on behalf of Hamilton College, I'd like to thank Jerome Richardson for sharing your
And
career.
thank you very
story.
much. Thank you.
Right.